Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to put on our detective hats and investigate some of history's oldest and most mysterious books. And the main tool we'll be using, it's something called textual criticism. Basically, scholars act like detectives, using all these tiny linguistic and historical clues to piece together the past. So that brings up a really big question, right? How can we actually be sure when a book written thousands of years ago was, well, actually written? And look, this isn't just some dusty academic debate. The date of a text can totally change how we understand its meaning, its claims, everything. Which leads us right to our first case file, the ancient book of Daniel.
All right, let's get into it. The Book of Daniel itself says it was written by a prophet living way back in Babylon during the 6th century BC. Simple enough, right? Well, not so fast. For centuries, a whole lot of scholars have argued that no, it was actually written much, much later, in the 2nd century BC. I mean, that's a 400-year gap. So what's the evidence? Let's take a look.
Okay, so the people who argue for that later date, they usually point to two main linguistic clues. First, the book has a few Greek words, specifically for musical instruments. And second, they claim the style of Aramaic used in parts of the book is a late form, not something you'd find in the 6th century. Now, on the surface, those sound like pretty solid clues, right? But the plot definitely thickens when you start digging a little deeper.
This is where it gets really interesting, because you can look at this one clue in two completely opposite ways. So the late date argument goes like this. Greek words could only show up after Alexander the Great marched through and spread Greek culture all over the Near East. Makes sense. But the counterargument just flips that right on its head. It points out that, hey, people were trading long before Alexander. And then it asks this really killer question. If the book was written so late, when Greek influence was everywhere, why are there only 3 Greek words? You'd expect to see a whole lot more. And you know what? It's the same story with that second clue about the Aramaic. The initial claim is pretty simple. Daniel uses a late form of the language. But when linguists really get in there and analyze it, they identify it as Imperial Aramaic, which was the common language of the entire Persian Empire. And the thing about Imperial Aramaic is that it's almost impossible to pin down to a specific century between 600 and 330 BC. In fact, 90% of the vocabulary in Daniel, it's found in texts from the 5th century BC or even earlier. So much for elite style. And then in the 1940s, something absolutely game-changing was discovered, the Dead Sea Scrolls. And guess what they found among them? Copies of the Book of Daniel, with some dated as early as 150 BC. Now here's the crucial detail. The community at Qumran, where the scrolls were found, already treated Daniel as sacred scripture. Think about that. It seems, well, pretty much impossible that a book could be written around 165 BC and then, in just 15 years, get copied and be revered as ancient holy scripture by this deeply traditional religious group. The timeline just doesn't add up. So what does this all mean? It points to a really crucial insight. Maybe this whole debate isn't just about linguistics or archaeology. Maybe it hinges on something much deeper. As Dr. Robert Vannoy puts it, the underlying question is whether or not one is prepared to accept the possibility of genuine predictive prophecy. If you start with the belief that prophecy is impossible, well then Daniel has to be dated after the events it describes. But if you're open to that possibility, suddenly the evidence for an early date looks a whole lot stronger. Okay, so our first case file, all about when a text was written, actually opens up a much, much bigger question about the ancient world. Were prophets and storytellers primarily speakers? Did their words get passed down orally for generations? Or were they writers from the get-go? Well, there's a major school of thought made popular by scholars like H.S. Nyberg that argued pretty strongly for the first option. They believed that for centuries, all these sacred stories and prophecies existed only as oral traditions. In their view, writing was for boring stuff like contracts and shopping lists. The great narratives, the soul of a culture, that was all carried in memory, and it was only committed to scrolls much, much later on. And the evidence for these powerful oral cultures is just, wow, it's truly fascinating. And we're not talking about just remembering a few lines from a poem. In ancient Babylon, for example, there's a text called the Era Myth, and it explicitly promises honor and open ears in the assembly of the wise, but only to the scribe who memorizes it perfectly. And this deep respect for memorization wasn't just a one-off thing. It was everywhere. At the famous Al-Azhar Mosque in Cairo, which was a huge center of learning, you couldn't even get in the door unless you could recite the entire Quran from memory.
flawlessly, without hesitation.
Honestly, the scale of this kind of memorization is almost impossible for us to wrap our heads around today. There's this incredible story about a Jewish scholar, Johanan ben Zakkai. And the story goes that he didn't just know the entire Mishnah by heart, he knew exactly how long each section took to recite. So precisely, in fact, that the legend says he could literally tell the time of day just by figuring out where he was in his mental recitation. I mean, can you imagine? More than 2,400 years ago, the great philosopher Plato totally picked up on the anxiety around this shift from memory to writing. Quoting his teacher Socrates, he gave this really chilling warning. He said that writing wasn't a cure for forgetfulness, it was more like a crutch. It's an elixir of reminding, as he put it. It gives you the appearance of wisdom, but not the deep, internalized, true wisdom that only comes from real memory.
Okay, so this brings us to the absolute key question here. The existence of a powerful oral culture, that's undeniable. But does that automatically mean a literary written culture didn't exist right there alongside it? Were these two things, oral and written tradition, like enemies, mutually exclusive, or did they actually work together?
Well, if you look at the texts themselves, they seem to answer that question pretty clearly. I mean, you find references all over the Old Testament to prophets and leaders being commanded to, you guessed it, write things down. You've got Moses told to write this on a scroll. You see that the events of King David's reign are written in the records of Samuel the seer. Writing seems to be a totally integral part of how they preserved both their history and their prophecies.
So when we step back and assess all the evidence, a much more nuanced picture starts to come into focus. Was oral tradition important? Absolutely, especially for passing stories from parents to children, within the family. But this oral tradition was never totally cut off from a written text. I mean, think about it. Even the examples we saw of memorizing the Quran or Babylonian myths were about memorizing a text. It really suggests that ancient cultures had this dynamic relationship where speaking and writing weren't rivals, but were essential partners in preserving knowledge.
All right, so we've looked at our two scholarly detective cases. What's the takeaway? Why does any of this, puzzling over ancient texts and traditions from thousands of years ago, why does it still matter to us right here, right now? I think our investigation really leaves us with two big takeaways. First, when you put an ancient text on trial, so to speak, you realize that simple theories often just crumble under the weight of all the complex evidence. And second, we've learned that ancient people didn't just choose between speaking or writing. They built this really sophisticated system where the two traditions work together, like partners, to preserve what was most important to them. And that leaves us with one final thought, one that echoes Plato's ancient warning right into our own time. In our digital age, with infinite information just a click away, have we fully embraced what he called the elixir for reminding? Have we gained the appearance of knowing pretty much everything, while maybe, just maybe, losing the deeper wisdom that only comes from the struggle and the discipline of true internalized memory? It's definitely something to think about.